What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Schrishzen Thoughts, where I talk about stuff. Shout out to my subscribers. Shout out to anybody new coming across this channel. Comments and feedback are always welcome, and if you like what you hear, feel free to subscribe. So, a little over a month ago, my brother passed away, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through emotionally. I'm not huge on crying, and I haven't had a death happen that was that close to me. My half-brother passed away a few years back, but I was not very close to him, so his didn't hit me like that. My grandmother passed away. She had Alzheimer's, was at a point in it where she didn't really remember who I was. She would have glimpses, but it was more of a relief thing. Anybody else that's passed hasn't been that close. So when this happened, it hit me pretty hard. And it was a situation that going through it, I was thankful that I had prepared for it, even though I wasn't ready for it. In that sense, I mean, I had the tools equipped for dealing with the grief process already in me and there, and it's just kind of finding them and utilizing them, or locating the tools that I had and putting them to use. I can say that because my friend, a friend of mine sent me a list of the top 10 stoic ways of dealing with grief, of managing grief. And in going through the list, I was like, I kind of implement all of these already. And it made it easier for me to deal with the process. And it was very interesting that in comments that I heard later on, people were like, yo, Steve was very stoic. And it was like, well, I grieved. I let the grief happen as it happened. But it's something that doesn't always come easy. And my main thing for this, it came up in conversation today with a friend of mine where he's going through some things, but it's like you have the tools to get through it. You just have to now locate these tools and put them to use. So in this situation, I'm like, I had never been through this deep of a loss. I've never been through this strong of a loss. I've never gone through this strong of an emotional reaction to an event happening. But I had the tools in place that as soon as it happened, I literally turned and reached into that bag and started fishing for what I knew. So, reading off the list: Seek refuge in philosophical studies. Don't conceal the wounds. Think about how much worse it could have been. Practice gratitude, acceptance. This too shall pass. See the blessings in the hardships. Journal. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. And amor fati, which is basically not as you wish things to be, but things going as they will. So the day that I found out, it was like an hour-long thing. Like my dad hit us up in our group chat and was like, yo, Mike's going to the hospital, he's having trouble breathing. A little while later, he's like, it's not looking too good. Hour later, he's like, he's gone. So the minute it happened, it was, I have to accept that this happened. My brother is gone. My brother is no longer here. I'm not going to get a message in 20 minutes that says, oh no, he's good, he's back. Like, no, this was it. That was it. Done. So it was like accepting that, and then accepting this hurts, and what comes from this hurts was in a flood of emotions. So my thing is generally like, kind of hold that in. If it comes out a little bit, it comes out a little bit. But in this case, I was like, cool, this hurts, this sucks. Don't block that emotion, because that emotion needs to come out. You need to just let out whatever you have to let out. This part was the challenge for me, though, because again, my gut instinct is, let me hold on to this. Let me keep this inside. So there was that level of acceptance of what happened, which I turned and immediately applied the idea of, I may be butchering it, but amor fati, which is the not I'm not wishing for things to go differently than they were. Not wishing like, oh, that this didn't happen. Like, as much as I didn't want it to happen, it was this happened. So I can wish it all I want, but it's not going to change it. So if I wish it, it's not going to help me feel better about this. Accepting it will, even if I don't feel better about this now. Quickly learned that emotions come in floods. So it wasn't like I broke down and then cried for a half hour straight. It would be like, I've got to call and tell people. So I'm running through my list of people, and like every third person I'm breaking down in the middle of talking to them. But what I didn't do was hold back even in the middle of a breakdown. I didn't cut any of them short. Just let them go. They didn't last for overly long. But when they did, it's just like, all right, whatever, you rock with it. But again, the acceptance that was built in. I didn't really seek refuge in philosophical studies. Not like that, because I had it all kind of built in there. I guess kind of in the sense of incorporating meditations that focused around grief, but not so much. Though I understand when things like this happen, you can turn to what you use as your source of comfort. Don't conceal the wounds. This is me not holding back on my emotions, the things that happened, the fact that this sucked and this hurt. I let that rock over, let me hold this in because I got to be strong for my family. Somebody's got to take care of stuff. Like, yeah, somebody does, but if I'm going to cry in the middle of doing it, I'm going to cry in the middle of doing it. Think about how much worse it could have been. This is something that didn't happen until after. And in reading the example, I'm like, it makes sense. And I did do this a little bit. Like, I was glad that what happened to him happened in the way that it did, where there was people around, as opposed to him possibly having been by himself with the 4-month-old, and everything happened with his girl showing up at the house and him laying on the floor done. Like, it could have gone worse, but this is something that didn't come in until afterwards. After I had kind of gotten through a first set of experiencing the experience. But it was one of those, when I first read this tip, I was like, or no. And thought about it, I was like, all right, this makes sense. This like could have been way worse. He could have died in a friggin' drunk driving accident with the kids with him. Like, didn't happen that way. You could have had what he had happen to him while he was driving with kids with him. So it's one of those, it sucks that it happened the way it did, but I'm glad that it happened the way it did and not worse. See the blessings and the hardships of this too shall pass. This too shall pass is a simple one because that's just been in there forever. Like, eventually this is going to change. You'll eventually feel better. Even if you don't feel good, you will eventually feel better than you did at the very beginning. The emotion should never be as strong after the very beginning as it was at the beginning. If it is, you're doing something wrong. There's a great analogy brought up of, like, when you tell yourself the same joke over and over and over again, you don't laugh as hard every time. So when you're telling yourself the same sad story over and over again, you shouldn't be crying the same every time. You shouldn't be as upset every time. Journaling was something I did turn to for a bit because it helped me to get out thoughts that I didn't think necessarily I could explain or articulate to other people without having to talk too much. So I was able to just talk to myself and say whatever I felt I needed to say that didn't necessarily require a response. So just having that to turn to helped and was very beneficial, and something that I did, again, just as a kind of, let me do this because I know that this helps. At least sometimes you can just get the thoughts out to yourself. This is useful, so let me turn to that. Gratitude. Accepting the fact that I need help in this one, and I have a whole lot of it. I had a whole lot of support. So acknowledging and seeing and accepting, I have help, I have support. Utilize it, lean on it, people to turn and talk to, different groups of people to turn and talk to. So it's not like, oh, I'm dumping everything on one set of friends. Like, I had multiple groups of friends that I could turn to, even for little bits. Even found out that I had random food connections that I make, and he turned out to be one of the more through it supportive people that I interacted with, where I'm tweeting and he's just responding to my random tweets, which helped me to get through the whole experience. Yeah, that's it. It's one of those, it's, again, equipping yourself with this stuff, it helps in regular life anyway. Acceptance helps in life anyway, where I argue with people all the time, and sometimes there's an acceptance of you're just not understanding my argument, even if I'm right and they're not grasping, or if I'm wrong, we're accepting the fact that I'm wrong and admitting that part. But if there are points even where I'll be doing stuff in regular life where I have to add this in, realizing in an argument somebody's just not grasping it, and it's like there's no point in continuing. You can just stop here, move on, maybe they'll get it later, but it might be time to just hit the brakes here. Equip yourself with the tools that are necessary to get through life. Often you will find that these same tools will get you through those super emotional situations like death. So if you already have them equipped and you already know how to access and utilize them, try and keep that a regular practice. That way when you need it, it's there. If you're unfamiliar, I will share the link to this article about the Stoic practices, but seek it out and learn it. Just even how to get through the grieving process, the steps of the grieving process. That way you know when it comes, like, this is what I should be doing. This is what I'm going to most likely go through. One of the best pieces of advice that I got through it was, yo, this stuff's gonna come in waves. The waves will get lighter, but it'll come in waves. And I'm like, okay. And then I would notice, like, bam, I had my first day, and the second day I'm like, oh, I'm okay, I'm good. Looked at my kid and I broke out. I'm like, all right, this is what they mean by the waves. They say that the waves eventually get lighter and then eventually subside and kind of spread out possibly over years, but it comes in waves. And I was like, great. But I didn't really necessarily expect it. I didn't remember reading that part in going through the grief process. And if even in some cases, I think I've largely skimmed over the majority of it because I'm like, I ain't got to deal with this anytime soon. But I was definitely glad that I had the tools equipped already, and because I utilized some of them on a regular basis, it made the ones that I wasn't so familiar with easier to add on. Hope you enjoyed. Comments and feedback are always welcome. Hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the bell icon. Doesn't really work, but it might help you get notifications of when I do post. Hope you have a good one. Peace.